Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Wickman, and together with Steve Sinas, we are board members of the Ingham County Bar Association. We are co-hosting today's event. We appreciate everyone able to join here. The Deliberations with a Judicial Candidate event is an event by the ICBA, Ingham County Bar Association, that is informational. It's intended to provide as much information about judicial candidates that we in Ingham County get to vote on. Today, we are very, very happy to have one Chief Justice who is up for re-election, Justice McCormack, and Miss Elizabeth Welch, who is also a candidate for the Supreme Court. The ICBA is a voluntary bar association that hosts educational, informational, and social events for our membership, and this is an informational one. So I will turn it over to Steve for what I missed. As a reminder, we don't endorse any particular candidates, but we hope that we're providing a service to our members to take a look at. So go ahead and take it over, Steve.
Yeah, and thanks to Chris. He's done really the majority of the heavy lifting on these events, and it's part of the Bar Association's commitment to our membership to provide benefits and other ways in which we give them information that they wouldn't normally be able to readily receive. And so these events are supposed to allow members of the Ingham County Bar, and I guess the world at large, to better know judicial candidates. We shouldn't just vote based on what name sounds right. We should vote based on what candidates we think would be the best judges and justices here in Michigan. So Ingham County Bar Association is proud to carry on this event, and especially today to have two candidates for the Michigan Supreme Court. We're going to have other events for the other candidates for the court. We're not endorsing any candidates for these events, but we certainly highly respect the people running for the highest court here in the state. And we have the Chief Justice, Bridget McCormack, here, and we can't thank her enough for making the time after what I understand to be a long day at the court. And we also have Supreme Court candidate Elizabeth Welch. And so this is being recorded, as Chris said. We're going to have this up on the YouTube channel, so hopefully it'll be a good resource for the rest of our members to watch and get to better know these candidates. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth first to explain herself and kind of give her own self bio. She does have to leave at 5:30, and then we'll have Justice McCormack do the same, and then we'll see how many questions we have and take it from there. So thank you again for being here, and Elizabeth, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you, Ingham County Bar, for hosting us. We are grateful to meet even in this way. As we all know, this is how we are doing business now. And I thank you. I do have to hop off at 5:30. We had a pre-existing campaign commitment, so I appreciate you letting me squeeze time in and join you. I am a longtime member of the Grand Rapids Bar and was a trustee there, so I appreciate your work. And this is a great example of the work you all can do as a public service. I want to just tell you a little bit about me, and obviously the interesting process that led me to be here in front of you today. I am a 25-year practicing attorney. I'm born and raised in Grand Rapids, and I was one of those kids who kind of left the state for college and law school, and I didn't quite plan on knowing that I'd be raising my children back in the same elementary school I went to. And so returned home to Michigan, joined Miller Johnson, worked for them for many years, and then started my own practice in 2004. I do employment law. I work with small businesses, a lot of nonprofit organizations. That's just a niche I've developed. And then a lot of individuals. So I work with individuals if they are navigating an employment dispute, but I have a real niche with a lot of physicians and executives and folks who are negotiating contracts. So that's become another niche as well. A lot of non-compete issues. That's a lot of my world. And so that's sort of my practice. I also I was of counsel to a criminal law practice for a few years. So I have some experience there, and then did do some abuse and neglect work pro bono for a couple of years. I'm really trying, this is back, about 10 years ago, trying to get more experience in that system as well. And I also, like many of you attorneys, you all are very civically engaged. It's sort of in our DNA. I was very, very involved in West Michigan on many issues where I was acting as an advocate, but not necessarily getting paid. So I have been a pretty active public school supporter. I was on a school board, but I really worked on a statewide basis to support good public school policy. Ended up in the Capitol a lot, ended up in Senate and House hearings a lot, as supporting both, good laws and fighting back laws that we disagreed with, of the big coalition we had built. I also have a lot of experience in election law and voter protection. Many of you maybe have participated in voter protection programs. Actually, Ingham has a pretty robust one. I oversaw that in Kent County in 2016 and 2018, ending with almost 200 people out at the polls and working closely with local clerks on the new laws, particularly after Proposal 3, because there were big changes and we needed our local clerks kind of ready to go on that, and we're trying to be proactive. And then finally, a lot of people know me around the state for my work with the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. I was the board chair of that group. They're the political voice for Michigan's air, land, and water, and found myself in kind of similar spaces as with my public school work, working in a bipartisan fashion with a lot of members in the legislature on conservation issues for folks around the state. I stepped forward after talked to the Chief Justice a couple of years ago about sort of the unique opportunity with this seat, really sat on it. I do have my own practice and had to really figure out a way to get it to part-time to take on running for a statewide office. Started the process in December, was putting 1,200 miles a week on my car and traveling all over. And of course, everything came to a screeching halt in mid-March, but I am grateful I did have almost 4 months on the road meeting people all over the state. So that was good that I got an early start. And privileged to be working alongside the Chief Justice. We do have a nominating process where in the state of Michigan, you do get nominated by the political parties. So we have been nominated by the Democratic Party to move forward. And I have the privilege of working with her in that process and doing everything we can. There's an open seat. Justice Markman is retiring. And obviously for people like me who are running, that's it's much easier to run for an open seat than against an incumbent. So, exciting opportunity, and I'm working really hard and doing everything I can to meet as many people like you and get input and thoughts, particularly on the court system and what's working and what isn't, and what can the Supreme Court do to help. And of course, the Chief Justice is doing all kinds of work in that complex system. And I'll stop there and turn it over to the Chief.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for doing this and for making the time and giving some attention to this race. Lawyers, I think, pay more attention to it than most people, but it is striking how many people don't cast a ballot in the Supreme Court race. I was elected in 2012 when there was an open seat. Similar to Elizabeth, I don't think I would have run if it was a contested seat. I was someone who had cases in the court, and that wouldn't have been a comfortable position for me to run against a justice. But there was an open seat, and I ran that year and was elected. At the time, I was on the faculty at the University of Michigan Law School and the Associate Dean for Clinical Affairs, which means I ran the clinical programs and founded a number of those clinical programs. Including a pediatric health advocacy clinic, a domestic violence clinic, and the Michigan Innocence Clinic, which has exonerated 23 people since we founded it in 2008. And I taught traditional classes as well. I was also on the faculty at Yale Law School for 2 years before I went to Michigan in 1998. I started my career as a public defender in New York City and tried a lot of cases and also argued a number of appeals in New York. Since I've been on the court, it's been an honor to be part of a high-functioning court, and the decision-making process is a big part of the job, but it's not all of it. Today it feels like a very big part of the job. We had one oral argument that started at 9:30 and finished at 1:45, I think. It was a long day. But the administrative oversight role is worth mentioning briefly as well, and so I'm going to do that in these introductory comments. The court, by state constitution, is charged with the administrative oversight of all the courts of the state. As you all know, there are lots of those, 242 trial courts in Michigan that between them hear millions of cases every year, between 3 and 4 million cases a year. And the kind of support they get from us varies. It's broad and it's deep. We have a talented administrative staff at SCAO who provide IT help, training, sometimes financial support for certain programs like drug courts and other treatment courts, as well as leadership roles on things like public health crises. This was the first year for that, but as you probably have seen, the court has been extremely active in our emergency orders. We've issued, I think, 18 or 19 so far since the end of March. In a typical year, we might only issue 2 emergency administrative orders, and some of them have been pretty comprehensive. We obviously have an order that gives courts specific instructions about how they can resume in-person operations. We have an order that gives district court judges specific direction on how to work through the backlog on the eviction docket. And we've removed all of the barriers to remote proceedings. And I'll love to hear from some of you about how some of that's going. There's been more change in the courts in the last 6 months than there has been in 3 decades. Michigan turns out to be a national leader. We had a little bit of a head start on everybody because we here had Zoom licenses. The trial courts all had Zoom licenses because the Supreme Court got them for them about 1.5 years ago. So we were all kind of poised for this transition. We just didn't know we'd need to do it so comprehensively and so quickly, but at least we had the tools and we stood up the support systems to make that work. As you know, many of the courts are live streaming their work onto the YouTube channel, so the public still has access to what's happening. And we're now starting to work through the biggest problem of all, which is jury trials. And that's going to be a problem. That's going to continue to be a problem as long as it's not perfectly safe to bring people into the courtroom. I can talk a lot more about the administrative work the court does. I find that work to be a tremendous opportunity to improve so many people's experience with the courts. And since so many people have to experience the courts, when the courts hear that many million cases a year, it does feel to me to be a really important part of the job. And so that's why I wanted to focus on it up front. But why don't I stop there, because I know Elizabeth has to leave in 10 minutes so that we can at least give her an opportunity to answer any of your questions. And I can stick around if there's more beyond that.
Thank you both. Questions for Ms. Welch at this time? Remember, you can unmute yourself, or you can go ahead and message myself or Steve, sign this in chat with regards to it.
There's one here in chat. I'll read here. Question is, how much do you believe an ideological perspective is part of being a judicial candidate versus being a problem solver?
So that's a really good question. I actually think to be a good judge, you actually are, I mean, you're obviously there to make a decision, and we all certainly bring our lens on the world and our life experiences with us, but obviously we commit to upholding the law. I actually think at the Supreme Court level, a problem-solving skill set is very, very helpful for exactly the reason the Chief Justice was talking about sort of taking on some of the hard issues within the court system itself. But I also think those analytical skills are transferable, certainly, to decision-making. But I think for the Supreme Court itself, a lot of people don't realize that administrative function, there's a lot of good hard work that's started under her leadership. And I think that problem-solving skill set is certainly one that the court can benefit from. I also will say that sort of a, what's the word, like a bridge building personality, or someone who's used to working with others where you don't all agree all the time. It's not a secret, but it's a panel of 7 people and they definitely don't always agree, but they have to learn how to disagree without being disagreeable. The Chief Justice has obviously been a model of that with her leadership. The court, frankly, did not always function that way. And I'm not sure the ages of folks on this call, but when I first joined Miller Johnson, and for a while there was a lot of very public infighting at the court. And so that sort of problem solving can mean being in a room together and figuring out how are we going to reach a decision. I mean, everybody can just go to their corners, of course, and write their opinions, but how are we all going to then continue to do the business of the court and all get along?
Thank you. Justice McCormack, perhaps you have a perspective on this, especially given your time on the bench already.
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. I think being able to be a good problem solver might be the most important skill of all. We make, unlike a trial court judge who is in charge of his or her courtroom and makes every decision alone, we make every single decision by committee, And if you're not a good listener today to one of your colleagues, I don't know why you're going to expect them to be a good listener tomorrow. And you're going to have another hard decision to make tomorrow. So it's, problem solver is part of it. I also think the skill of being genuinely willing to hear somebody else's different perspective and have it change your mind is a really important skill. And that's one that I very much treasure in a colleague.
Thank you very much. We are going to move on here. There's another question or two in chat. Does anyone want to pipe up with their own question? Now we can move on to the next question. The question is to Elizabeth, and it says, you have not served as a judge before. Why do you think you are prepared to be a judge at the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I appreciate that. We have this interesting thing that's happened with our Supreme Court, which I think is one of the highest functioning Supreme Courts that's existed since I've been back in Michigan, since 1997. And we have a bunch of folks on there who were not judges first. So I think 3 of them, I'm just thinking Beth, Megan, or 4. So actually a majority were not judges first, and I think have proven to be stellar justices. And I think part of that is, again, because of the skill set they bring. It's a very different job than being a trial court judge. Certainly you have to understand, the intellectual components of the job, which I did litigation for 10 years. So that part I do understand. But you have to, nobody's an expert in anything, even if you're a sitting judge on substantive law. Every case is different, which is one of the exciting parts of the job, certainly. But most of us come to our practice with certain experiences, and trial court judges have, a lot of maybe certain experiences. And I think by the time you get to the Supreme Court, some of the skill sets are different. I do think actually the connectedness that I have with my frontline clients is actually an important one. I'm not disconnected with what the justice system looks like to people and what it needs to look like. I have a pretty clear idea because we're in it all the time. And so I think that's an important lens to bring. So it is an interesting shift. I recognize that historically, if you go back, it was mostly people who held judicial seats before was sort of the pathway. And for a variety of reasons, in the past decade, that has changed, not just in Michigan, but in other places too.
All right, thank you. Elizabeth, you're on almost the end of the time here that you have with us. I'll ask you a question if you don't mind. When you think back through your time as a lawyer, what was the most inspiring moment you can think you can remember, or one of the moments where you said you're glad you chose this profession and you feel really good about it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked about my public school advocacy. So we have work we get paid for and work we don't, and all of it's super important work. But that work I did in Lansing, there was a package of bills we worked really hard. There was a group of us, and frankly, it was a lot of hard work over in West Michigan on a certain package of bills. There was something called the Education Achievement Authority. I won't get into the weeds on it, but it was a lot of work reviewing legislation, working hard to amend legislation, and then it was all aspects of my skill sets coming together, whether it was parsing out legislation, helping draft and parse the words, making sure we understood it, and then also activating networks of literally thousands of people to speak up, and then meeting with folks in Lansing. And we were able to push back this sort of group of bills that obviously, in my opinion, based on the work and what I was doing at that point, would have been really hard for public schools. So that was at a time when fighting for public schools was very difficult. There had been huge cuts, and this was going to be like one more final thing. And so that actually was a moment where we did have a little victory lap. So we still had to go on to do much more work after that, but there was a moment where our work was very much rewarded.
Thank you for that. And we'll allow you to say any final comments that you would like to share with the group, and then we'll unfortunately have to take up more of Justice McCormack's time and ask her for some more questions. But,
well, I know, and I appreciate breaking apart. I know Justice McCormack is in the court, and I'm sure people are very eager to talk to her, and she's got so much interesting stuff she's working on with the technology side of things. As many of you know, we are really lucky to have her pushing the courts on that, and it's a huge opportunity, and it is one that I think some of those changes are going to, the good news is some of the positive things are going to stick. So I know she'll be eager to talk about that. So I just thank you all. I think I've said everything about my background, and I'm available for questions, very accessible. I really have enjoyed meeting people all over the state in the different practice areas. The court indeed overlaps into all practice areas, but also just the functioning of the courts. And if there is, I am hearing input, people's concerns, things people believe that can be done better. And it's interesting because you do hear themes, and that's important. Just like when I knocked on 5,000 doors running for school board, you'd hear themes, and it's the exact same thing. And those are the important things your Supreme Court justices need to know about. So thanks, everybody.
all right, thank you so much. Feel free to sign off whenever you'd like.
Thank you. Yeah, I do have to jump to my next event. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
And Justice McCormack, there are a few questions for you. I know it's a long day, so I appreciate you making the time.
No problem.
There's a question about COVID. The question is, what was the guiding principle that the court followed in deciding how to, it says, administer the COVID shutdown?
I guess I don't think there's one. I think there were two primary guiding principles. One was courts can't shut down, even or especially in emergencies. Justice has to be available even at the hardest moments for a community. And at the same time, courthouses are such high density places, and unlike restaurants or amusement parks where you have the option to decide whether to go to them, that's not true about courts. If you're directed to be in court, there's, you know, a judge has told you to be there, you have to be there. You don't get to choose that. That's not a safe or smart thing for you to do. So we had a really important role to play in protecting public health while making sure that access to justice would continue to be available. So we had to, with those two principles in mind, figure out what things would need to continue to be done in the courtroom and how we could make sure we could get the rest of it done on a remote platform.
I guess I have a question and follow up to that, if you don't mind. Was there, and I know you can't disclose too much about the deliberations, but was it generally, did everyone kind of have a similar perspective on how to go about things, or was there fundamentally different views, or was there generally a consensus about how to operate?
I think more than generally, we've issued, and I should know if it's 18 or 19 emergency orders related to COVID, and every single one of them has been unanimous. So that doesn't mean that we didn't hash out some of the details of some of them, especially some of the more elaborate ones. We did, but we always came to consensus, and that was important to us.
Was there anything in the history of the Supreme Court that gave you any guidance, like the 1919 Spanish flu, or
yeah, it's funny, you know, you can see pictures from 1918, and they have lawyers and judges doing trials outside, which is amazing. So they were doing, you know, some of the things we're trying to do now to figure out how to do it safely. But there's no written history that I know of. It was, you know, so no, there wasn't anything to look to historically to help us. We just had to figure it out.
Here's a question in chat. It says, is there any concerns the court has these days in light of the recent issues involving, it says, police misconduct and or racial issues here in America?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the court on that topic, but I can speak for me. I think it's an important conversation that's being had across our country and across our state and in many of our communities. And the state courts adjudicate most cases, 95% of criminal cases and 95% of civil cases. And the judges who serve their local communities, we know that the public wants the judges to understand what their local communities have going on. The National Center for State Courts surveys the public every year, and every year the public says they want judges who are engaged in their local communities. You know, it used to be that a judge is sort of removed and not accessible to the public, and that's not what the public wants. The public wants to understand, the public wants to know that their judges understand what their community is struggling with. And right now, our communities want some change in terms of how certain communities interact with the police. Obviously, courts make decisions in individual cases that sometimes raise issues around racial justice, but obviously in each individual case, we apply the law to the facts of that case. But through that administrative work, we do have the opportunity to make sure that our courts are able to deliver the quality of justice and the kind of justice that the public deserves. So let me give you one example of something I spent a lot of time on with my administrative oversight hat on over the last 18 months, or maybe not with specifically that hat on, but something I spent a lot of time on that might make a difference in how certain communities interact with police officers at the front end of the criminal justice system. I've been the co-chair with the Lieutenant Governor of the Governor's Task Force on Jail and Pretrial Incarceration since March of 2019. Michigan's county jail populations have tripled in the last 30 years, even though crime is at a 50-year low. We had no data to explain that. 83 counties in Michigan, 81 county jails, 81 county data collection systems. No, therefore, statewide way of understanding what was going on. We were very lucky to get a very generous grant from the Pew Charitable Trust to help us collect that data. And the task force, which is bipartisan and reflects an agreement between myself, the governor, the legislative leadership, the sheriffs, and the Michigan Association of Counties, went around the state after collecting the data and parsing it and trying to understand it. We heard from the public who was impacted by the front end of the system, and we made 18 recommendations that would make Michigan a national leader in jail and pretrial reform. And as you know, it's that front end of the criminal justice system where people interact with their local police and deputy sheriffs. And the recommendations that we made would really change those ways, the ways many communities interact with their police officers. And as of today, I think 7 of the recommendations that are in bill form had hearings. And again, this is an issue around which there is bipartisan support and interest and commitment to working on it. And even though it's not a case-specific decision, I feel like it's some of the most important work I've done in the last year and a half, and it's one way that one justice can contribute. We'll have some work to do in juvenile justice that we'll be talking about coming up soon. And there's other things like that. So there's an opportunity, I think, for the court to play a positive role in the conversations that are happening around the state.
Thank you,
Thank you
Justice.
thank you. Chris, did you have a question?
Yes, I had a question from chat. It's actually a three-part question, so I'll address them kind of one at a time. I would like to know the justice's thoughts on unpublished Court of Appeals opinions that deal with the same legal issue and substantially same facts, but reach different outcomes. And then the second part of that is, given that the Supreme Court is not an error-correcting court, any suggestions on what practitioners should do when that happens?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, the Court of Appeals just does such a high volume of cases that we've looked at this question before in our rulemaking capacity about whether all decisions should be published, or more should be, or should we, tweak the rule that helps decide which should be published and which not. And I can certainly understand how it would be incredibly frustrating as a lawyer. Not only can I understand, I have experienced it, to have a case that is decided by one panel on seemingly similar facts and seemingly the same law differently than another one. And that's, always something that I'm sure the judges on the Court of Appeals are willing to rethink and look at. I think at the bench bar conference last spring, in one of the small groups, we were talking about it. I'm not sure what came of it. My advice as a practitioner is I mean, I don't know if this is, it might depend on the case, but in some cases it might make sense to request publication. If there's a reason why you think that the case might need more attention, publication will get it more attention when it's appealed, and obviously we'll give it more authority that it needs if you think it should be published. So that's one aspect of it. But I feel like this is the kind of conversation that we should all be having, especially the appellate section of the state bar, together with the judges on the Court of Appeals and my colleagues. I know that the last time we considered it, we might have made small tweaks, but no big movements. But that doesn't mean that there's not a better way to do it. And I think it's our job to hear that if there is one.
Thank you. Chris?
I think that answered the third part of my question, which was, has the Supreme Court given consideration to this situation? And I think that's been answered. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
I don't see another question in chat here. Any attorney here want to ask the Chief Justice a question? It's free of charge. She's here 5:40 after a long day. If you don't mind, go ahead, Sandy. Yes.
Oh, thank you. My question's about the tolling that's going to occur as a result of the order number 18, and how that's going to be applied to cases. And I know it's a little awkward for me to ask, because obviously I think this is going to be an issue that might be coming up through the courts eventually. But just in general, I don't know if you can talk about what was intended in terms of how the order is actually applied to cases.
Yeah, I think unfortunately I won't talk about that one, because I have already heard that there's some issues that are getting litigated around it, yeah. And therefore, because it's a question that's going to come to the court, I think it's appropriate for me to have to take a pass on that. I'm sorry. I will tell you that we worked hard to figure out good solutions at the front end with all of those orders, and it's hard, and it's very hard in emergency fashion to get everything perfectly. We hope we did a good enough job, and that we can clean up whatever imperfections we left as you all duke it out.
It keeps us employed.
My commentary on it is, I think the world should just be okay with what happened, and let's not make more fights over fights. So, but we'll see. We'll see. Is there anyone else who wants to jump on? Free of charge questions to the most high-ranking judge here in Michigan. Well, I'll take one opportunity if you don't mind, Justice McCormack.
You bet.
I know you had such a great career before being a justice, doing all kinds of worthwhile causes. And so I've heard about those, and I think the world knows about those. But is there any one particular moment that sticks out in your mind while serving as a justice that you really look back on and think of being as a fulfilling, satisfying moment for you as a professional, as an individual, whatever it may be?
It's a great question. I guess the moments that you remember, the decision-making work is such a slog. Like it's so many, like, you know, like hours and meetings and hours and meetings and new drafts and more drafts, and the moments don't really stick out in most of the decision-making work, but in the administrative work, it often does. I can't tell you that any graduation from any treatment court ceremony that I've been able to attend, been honored to attend, where I haven't cried. I mean, honestly, like I get to go to another one on Monday, a veterans treatment court graduation, and the things that are happening in our treatment courts throughout the state are just tremendous. You know, the trial judges are just doing a tremendous job, and it feels pretty awesome to be able to support what they do in all the ways that we do at the Supreme Court. When we pushed the 23 really pushed, when we worked with the 23 really diverse members of the jail task force, you know, we had police, prosecutors, criminal defense attorneys, people who spent time in jail, people who were victims of crime, people who, judges, county commissioners, really diverse group of people. When they worked incredibly hard over 2 months, and 2 months of the policy piece of it, and got to consensus, and we were able to, you know, this really, you know, 2 Republican legislators, 2 Democratic legislators, like just a really diverse group of people to sit around a table and deliver a unanimous consensus report. I almost was ready to, like, George Costanza it right there and be like, that's it, I'm out, it's a wrap. It wouldn't have been the right answer because we got to get it all through the legislature still, but that felt like a lot of work that was well worth it.
Thank you very much. If no one else has the gall or courage to ask the Chief Justice a question, I think that we're clear in chat. Chris, are you clear?
No other additional questions here.
Okay. Well, we thank you so much for taking the time after a long day. This will be a resource for others to watch. We thank for those who attended, and everybody keep an eye on the Supreme Court race and keep yourself educated about these candidates. It's a big race. It's an important race, 2 seats. So everyone's got to make an informed decision this November.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Did you have any final thoughts? No, thanks for paying attention to the race. It matters, you know, not just because the decisions are obviously important, but because the court has this really important role to play in how justice is administered through our state. So I appreciate that you all are devoting time to this, and thank you for that. All right, everybody. Chris, I think we can end the recording, and this will finalize the event, unless you have anything else to add, Chris.
Nope, thank you so much, Justice McCormack, for attending, and I will go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks for everyone